want this to
13.
look like this.
You do have notes. And, oh, and there's no special today. Sister was to do the special. So, if we don't have a special, that's okay. We have a baptism. That's going to take up some time. Zach is getting baptized. And,
All right.
he's Zach is of the three boys. I was thinking about as grandparents, we spend time with whatever grandchildren are at the house. Now Zach, Luke, and Grayson are not at our house a lot. You know, they're home. My other three are with us a lot. But Zach seems real aggressive. Does he seem that way to you? I mean, he seems forward. Pardon? Well, about anything. You know, he's aggressive. And then Luke is reserved. No? Well, around us he seems more reserved. And then Grayson seems to be a comedian. Seems to be a comedian. So anyway, Shane seems to be all three of those. He's all three rolled into one.
Multi-talented.
Yeah.
Multitasking.
Okay. Acts 13. Now we did do a wee bit of this last week, but you did not have notes in front of you. There are things that I probably did not include in other notes that I should have, that I noticed in reading some guys, they include it in, and then sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, and then if it's not a forced habit, it tends sometimes to get overlooked, such as some information that you may say, well, how's that helpful? But it is information. And then the first point, I don't know what, and it is on there. First thing, it contains 52 verses. Now to say, well, how does that help you? It really doesn't, but it is information, it's factual information. Anybody know how many letters there are in the Bible? Letters, words, verses, chapters. Those are statistical numbers. They can be figured out, and then why would it vary? Why would that information vary? No, let's not go with, let's go with King James. Let's not go any other translations. Those are all pretend those are in the dumpster. Let's stick with the King James. Why would that vary? What would vary?
Spelling?
Yes. So the letter count would change. In the differences between two things.
The Cambridge and the Oxford edition?
Savior and the Saviors.
Yeah, like Savior and Savior. The way the Brits do it and the way we do it. If you say Savior, the way the British do it, how is that spelled?
7 letters.
And the way Americans do it, what's missing?
The U
word. The U. All right, and the spelling. Favor is another one. Favor, Brits spell it O-U-R. We spell it O-R.
Let's stick with the King's English.
Pardon? Yeah, color is another one. Color. The word thoroughly or throughly, that is different in a couple of different editions. Throughly and thoroughly. And I'm trying to think of any other thing that would pop out, but the spelling would be one. And those two are different words. Yes, that's not just a spelling. Those are two different words. And the way that it is, we say thoroughly I mean, thoroughly is the correct word. Thoroughly is not. I think the Nelson's is thoroughly, not thoroughly. That word is actually different. But there are others I'm not familiar with, but the spelling would be different. But the number of verses, etc., number of chapters, and so on. That is just some statistical facts. Now, can you gain something from it? I don't know. You have to be a numbers guy to try to get some out of it. But it's not going to help you, in your dinner today, The paragraph markings, we did look at them last week. They appear at 1, 4, obviously 1 if you give a new chapter, 4, 14, 38, and 44. So it divides it into 5 separate headings. They separate Barnabas and Paul from the others. So it's the separating verses 1 through 3. They send them out in verse 4. They were sent out, the sending in verses 4 through 13. The sermon that is given is in verse 14 through 37. And then the results of that is the saving of those that had responded to the message in verse 38 through 43. And then after that, the rest of town wants to hear about it. So the spreading of this, it does spread, it spreads around. 44 through 52. Now, I guess I get thinking about it right now. Why would it spread like that in America? Say that again. Okay, no persecution. That's one reason. In this particular case, now maybe I'm wrong, is that in America it's well saturated. I mean, this is supposed to be a Christian nation. It's not like this is some new thing. It's like it's already been heard, so it's already well saturated. Now, is the seed sterile? It's not going to sprout. Once the seed lays around, I don't know what the statistics are on seed, but I'm pretty sure that if you let's say it's grass seed. I don't know if you guys know the statistics on if you have seed, let's say corn seed. If you plant it the next year, there's a percentage of that comes up. If you hold on to it and you plant it the year following, less comes up. And every year succeeding after that, less will sprout. Is that a true statement?
It says on the bags that 85% of this is germinates, so 50% waste of the bags.
When 85% germinates.
85% germination, so 50% of that bag is grown.
Yeah, but that doesn't do the years.
Yeah, but what about the next year?
Yeah.
And then next year, now I've read this, I'm pretty sure that if you hold on to that seed, it has less chance of germinating.
It might dry
I
out.
know the nature of seeds, they can last for hundreds of years, like wheat seeds, they can sit there.
And they can still germinate.
So I think the nature of seed is very hardy and very tough and very.
Well, maybe I'm all wet. Did I make an accurate statement, or am I way off in the left
Well,
field?
if it's got a good shell,
No, like if it's a desirable seed, those tend to be weaker than you said wheat seeds. Those
Are they with age, they weaken certain seeds? Yes.
Yeah.
I know from the seeds that we sell at the store, they always say package for like the 2017 growing season. So I'm thinking that if they're packed for that season, that's probably for the best results.
In other words, the succeeding season isn't going to do well. Every succeeding season after does less.
Right. And
All right, so let's go with those two reasons. Number
yeah,
one,
and I've heard that they have a tendency to lose their focus because the seed dries.
something happens,
Yeah.
whatever that is. All right, so let's go with those two reasons. Number one, Brother Newman said there was no persecution. The persecution not here, so it's not spreading. And the other reason is it's so saturated, people have heard it, they're numb to it. They get numb to it, Where this was some new thing, and it caught on, yes, right away.
if someone has believed the false gospel, they'll be immune from believing the true gospel.
Okay.
like growing up as a Catholic or something.
Yeah, they're saturated, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm trying to think of what, if it's.
Because
I'm
Jesus
trying to think
said
of the word for it.
Our man's tradition has nullified the effect of the Word of God in a man's life. And you gotta disabuse people of what they believe, so they can believe the truth. They gotta find out that they're wrong.
Yeah, you know, we always say it's, the tough part of salvation is getting them lost.
Yeah.
Tough part's getting them lost. If they think they're okay, then that's tough. The easy part's getting them saved, the hard part's getting them lost. So the spreading of it, it spreads different in different places of the world. If there's a lack, physical needs, there's lacking, and there's a lot of turmoil in a person's life, they tend to get more apt to be saved. You know, they're trying to latch on some hope. So there's all right. So there's more than one reason. More than one reason for it not to spread. But here it did spread. The spreading of it. All right. Verse 1. The church at Antioch is organized. You know, I got thinking about this in missions, and this is the first missionaries. And now, I'm not saying it's wrong to do. And I'm not saying we should not do it. And I'm certainly not going to say I'm going to preach against missions. Certainly not that. Where's the missionary called out of? The mission board or the church?
Should be the church.
It should be the church, all right? So let's go that route. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't be in a mission board. I'm not saying that either. I'm not preaching against anybody. But I'm just saying, is there another example in the Bible where missionaries are sent out of a church other than Antioch in this place? Where you can point to and say, this is the way it is. We tend to find one place, point to it, and say, this is the way it is. Was there anybody called out of Ephesus or any of these, Galatia or Thessalonica?
Wasn't Paul called to Greece?
Paul, boy, I'm trying to ring a bell with a verse that states that.
What is your question?
Show another church other than Antioch where people are separated, called out of, and those churches, in other words, this was the standard fare. Paul taught that missionaries, call them evangelists, are sent out of different churches. Give me another example other than this church. I can't think of one. I cannot think of one. I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. And to preach at a standard fare. I'm not saying that, but I'm just trying to find another example of it. Yes?
Paul wasn't even called out of church. He was called on,
He was called under the gospel. He wasn't really called. He was called out of this church, though. But he was called before that.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was called before that. But you can't find a place where they were. Yes. Other than this church. Technically, no. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, may every word be established, right? At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Why is it at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses? Because in the law, you could do what? You can't condemn a man to death.
With only one witness.
Yeah, you can't. See, in our society, you can't send a man in the electric chair at the mouth of 1 witness. You got to have at least 2 or 3 witnesses to send a man to the electric chair.
For solid evidence.
Yeah, you have to have solid evidence. So you can't use that as a doctrine. So when they come in and they can stomp around and say this and that, well, it's okay, but it's not necessarily doctrinal. All right? Or we can't look less on Ephesus or Thessalonica, the church there, or the church any other place, and look less upon them than another church. But they were called out of Antioch. There's no doubt about it. And that kind of sets the tone of, and we'll say mainly the Baptist church. Now other churches would use this too. I'm not saying the Methodists or the local community church wouldn't go here and do the same thing. And I'm not preaching against it, but I'm not preaching for it either. It is what it is. It is what it is. So it's organized by Barnabas. We looked that up last week. He was sent there to encourage the saint. He's a great comforter. What was his name? His name is the son of what? Consolation, which is another form of comfort. So he's a comforter. And that is a gift. He had the gift of doing that. Where one person, the way people viewed Paul, how did they view Paul at the beginning? The Apostle Paul. How did the Christians view Paul at the beginning? That, hey, he was like a lightning rod, like stay away from, he's like a rattlesnake. Where Barnabas went and deliberately went to him and brought him to the other apostles to comfort Paul, and win over the others to accept Paul. So that was the gift that he had. The assumption is that Barnabas is younger, middle-aged, or older. Middle-aged to older. If he was middle-aged, he was mature. If he's older, he's mature. But it's a gift. I believe that was a gift that he had as a comforter. And so if the church is organized by Barnabas. He stays there for a while. It is the fruit of the scattered members of the church in Jerusalem when Saul scattered the church in Acts 8:1. I don't feel led to go to these verses. We did this last week. Prophets and teachers. These people, names them off here. Certain prophets as... now look at, now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers. The word as, I never noticed that till just now as I read that. It's almost like saying such as. When we say as, to me it indicates that there were others. These are the ones we're naming. Do you feel that way when you read that? As Barnabas, giving examples. It's like giving examples. Is that one possibility of reading that? That there were others there also.
Yeah.
I never noticed that till now. Yeah, like such as Barnabas. And he gives these half a dozen, 4 or 5 examples, meaning there were others. That's possible. Now, can we go and preach as a doctor? No. We can't do that. But it appears like we might be able to do that. As Barnabas, Simeon, Lucius, how many are there? Now, and then prophets and teachers. Is Barnabas, Simeon, Lucius? Yeah, but you know what? Amongst those of the prophets and teachers that are named, now Saul is mentioned later, but he's not mentioned in that group as the such as. How many are in the such as? Only 4? 4. And then in the next verse, Paul is mentioned. So if we include Paul, that's 5, right? There's 5. If we include... There's 5 in that verse. In verse 1. Oh, okay. You can read it over 14 times, yeah. Yeah. And still miss it. Yeah, there's 5 in the verse. There's 5 in the verse. But when you read the word as, it's a possibility that there were others. They just mentioned, these are the ones we're mentioning. We're not going to list them all. All right? Prophets and teachers. God gives gifts to men and then gives these gifted men to the church. Now we looked and we went to 1 Corinthians 12 for gifts. Those are sign gifts. And where's our gifts given? Romans chapter 12. The easiest way to remember where gifts are listed. 1 Corinthians 12, and that's the same chapter count, Romans 12. I think 9 of them are mentioned at 1 Corinthians 12. 7 are mentioned in Romans 12. Romans 12. And then it's for the perfecting of the saints. And in what's listed there in Ephesians chapter 4. All right. Giving it as far as a prophet and teacher. Abraham was a prophet, Genesis 20, and Ezra was a scribe, already scribe. Abraham's Genesis 20, and Ezra in Ezra's chapter 7. And Christ taught the kingdom after the resurrection. And I don't know why I wrote that down, but we have that in there. Verse 2. Father, now bless the balance of this lesson this morning and just minister to the saints. In Christ's name, amen. Technically, we only have 5 minutes left. All right, the first duty of the prophet and teacher is to minister to the Lord. Notice what it says in verse 2, as they ministered to the Lord. Now, giving examples of that, as they ministered to the Lord, without turning to these verses, what appears in Revelation 4, verses 8 and 10? Who's ministering to the Lord in Revelation 4? You know what? I could have had that in verse 10. The 4 and 20 elders. Yes, sir. If it's verse 8, what is it? Ministering to the Lord. Anybody recall? The 4 beasts. The 4 beasts, and what do the 4 beasts say?
Holy, holy,
Holy,
holy.
holy, holy. And then you have the 4 and 20 elders. And that could be the verse 10. One's verse 8, the other's verse 10. Isaiah 6, verse 3. What's ministering to the Lord there? In the year that I saw King Uzziah die, Isaiah says. Yeah, it's the seraphim. And what do they say there?
Holy, holy,
Holy, holy, holy. Luke 7. Who ministers to the Lord there?
The
in
angels.
Simeon's house.
Oh,
Simon's house, the Pharisees' house. Who's ministering to the Lord there?
the sinners.
The sinner, and a man or woman.
The Mary Magdalene
Yeah, the woman, and what did she do?
washed his
Washed
feet.
his feet with her tears and wiped his feet. All right. So I listed just some examples there of ministering to the Lord. To love the Lord. The first command is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like unto the first, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. So the ministering of the Lord is first to love the Lord. We are to do that. If one's able to minister to the Lord, love the Lord, he'll be able to minister to others. If you can't love the Lord, you're not going to be able to love others. I mean, if you do the love of others first, you're putting the what before the what? You're putting the cart before the horse. Now, I'm not saying people don't help other people, but it's a carnal, or it's different. They have the cart before the horse. All right, Romans 13, go there. Romans chapter 13. We skipped that. I thought I'd read these others first. Romans 13. It talks about the fulfilling of the law, verses 8 through 10. Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. It is the fulfilling of the law. For this thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, bear false witness, covet. Commandments briefly comprehended in the saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. It is to fulfill the law, and that's by loving one another. Loving the Lord first and loving one another. All right, back here to Acts 13. Niger. It is Latin for the word black. Now, Corey. It's Latin. How do you say black in Italian? You don't know how?
Negro.
Do you Spanish?
Pardon?
Negro.
Negro means black. Negro.
Yeah, if you were to look it up, another thing it means, I think it means also burnt. It also means burnt. How do you say it in Spanish? Black?
Negro.
Oh, there it is. You
I think
see?
it's the same in Italian.
Pardon?
I think it's the same in Italian.
It is the same. Say it again.
Negro.
Negro. Negro is black. That's what it means. All right? And it means, I believe I've also heard it means burnt. Burnt. So Latin for black. All right. Teachers teach others who will teach others. All right. 2 Timothy, this is what's on the chapter 2, verse 2. This is what is on the discipleship plaque for the men. We use the one for the women where Mary sits at the feet of Jesus and shows in the better of the two between Martha and Mary. And this is the one that we put on for the men. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. All right, there are those that sit in church forever. Forever. No matter where the church is, or what, or how weak the teaching is, you should be listening and absorbing something and learning something. Even when I went on visitation with people, one would confront them on where they went to church, and if they went to a Roman Catholic church, they just railed on them. They would rail on them. And they would go at it, and I thought, what would you learn from that? Exactly, you learn by good examples and bad examples. The guy taught me, man, I learned something. I said, you know what? I'm going to make sure I never do that. Never ever do that. The first time I went on visitation with a preacher, it was almost knockdown drag out between him and a woman at the door. We were in the street and they were yelling back at forth at each other. She was calling us Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were just, and I thought to myself, and this was my first time ever on visitation, but I was older, and I wasn't afraid of meeting people, doing sales calls. I wasn't afraid of meeting people. And so I thought to myself, wow, when I'm on a sales call, I'm trying to make a sale, I'm thinking, I don't think he's going to make a sale today. That wasn't going to make a sale. And it taught me what not to do. So you can always be learning. So even if, no matter how weak or how strong teaching can be, you should be learning something. And if it's the right teaching and it's weak, we'll learn from that. And they say, well, I already know that. Well, all it is exercising. There's nothing wrong with doing the same exercise over to stay in shape. Right? Nothing wrong with that. But I know people that have sat in strong churches, specifically for 5 years, and then talking to them after a big split and a blow up, and then what they say after. I mean, dear friends of ours, and I'm thinking, I thought to myself, where have you been for the last 5 years? They must have been staring out the window or out to lunch or whatever. Or maybe their retention wasn't like mine. I don't know. But we always should be learning something. And then it's like a joke. The best way to remember a joke is to what? Repeat the joke. Tell the joke. So when you have the opportunity to relay this information or to teach somebody else, is that opportunity should be taken. And it helps exercise the ability to do that. My brother is going to be teaching Hebrews. Now, he told me helping in a class, and boy, I'm not into that. I'm not into a two-headed monster. I don't see the fruit in that. Now, is it going to be a two-headed monster? I don't know, but I gave him one commentary. I have a preference in a commentary, a certain other one, and I loaned it out. It's by Phillips. It is really, really good. It's not old. It's a newer guy. When I say new, he could be from the 40s, 50s, or 60s. He could be from the 1980s. But Phillips, I think he's out of a Moody publisher. It's really, really good. And we used it in the Institute. I told him he could pick up a paperback. I don't know, I must have loaned it out to somebody, but I never got it back. And I told him to get that, and then I got my survey notes, and I thought we went verse by verse, and I couldn't find it, and I was hopeful your wife's not here, that she would know where she put it in the file cabinet. I decided I'm not looking for it. Then I decided, well, you know, if my brother's going to teach that, what should he do? Not rely so much on my notes. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you get other guys' commentaries and notes, he needs to do a little digging himself. I told him, whatever you do, don't get John Calvin's. You're not going to learn anything out of that book. I've already gone through John Calvin's notes, and there's nothing really there. You say, wow, he's an old timer. And I'm not saying you can't get something out of it. Man, you got to really dig to get something out of that one. But I have different notes, and you glean what you can. But you have to do some study of your own in digging in other people's things. And what do you do when you eat chicken?
Spit out the bones.
You spit out the bones, right? If you didn't like it, well, spit those bones out.
There seems to be no record of John Calvin's conversion
Oh.
from a Roman Catholic priest to a born-again Christian.
Yeah, I'm not going to say whether or not he's lost or saved. I just assume he's saved. And but I don't recommend John Calvin in reading his notes or comments. It's I never got anything out of John Calvin. You know, so there's good ones, there's bad ones, just like anything else. All right, verse 2. The work whereunto I have called him, that is to bear the name of Christ before the Gentiles. He was called to do that. Now, if we go back to Acts 9, this is what Buster was in reference to. If you go back to Acts 9, he wasn't called specifically out of Antioch. He was sent out of Antioch, but the call came before that. The call came before that. Now, listen, I got called to preach in 1989, and the guy was Jim McGahee. He preached. I hit the altar and I said, you know what? I need to do this. God called me. And you shouldn't feel guilty if you didn't get called. But God called me. I felt that. And then right after that, you know, the seeking of that, and you know, where should I go to school? Should I go to school? What should I do? The preacher would rail on me on a regular basis about you can't start a church within 50 miles of this. It just was endless. Instead of encouraging me, it was like a big discouragement. But if you go to Acts 9, verse 15, the Lord said unto him, go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. And so the work, what was called for Paul to do, was to bear the name of Christ before the Gentiles. Now, it started out, he bore the name before his Hebrew brethren. He did that. And he probably did that all the way through. But mainly it was to before the Gentiles. Listen, there's nothing wrong with remaining. I'm trying to think of where that is. I think it's 1 Corinthians 7, I think, is to remain in the same calling whereunto you were called. I think it is. I know it's on the, oh yeah, it's in 1 Corinthians 7. Go there. Now, I hate to think if I'm pulling this out of context. If you look at verse 18 and 19 of 1 Corinthians 7, we're talking about uncircumcision, meaning Gentiles, and verse 19 is circumcision. But look at verse 20. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. Now, if we put it in its context, whether you were circumcised or uncircumcised, you need to stay that way. You don't go ahead and get circumcised, or you can't undo the other. It says, let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. So, I know in reading up on that, there's some jump to the next level. If you were an engraver, it doesn't mean you gave it up, and you got to now do something else. You got saved, you could just Stay a bricklayer. There's nothing wrong with that. Stay in the calling that you were. You don't have to jump ship. And so on. So, anyway, the work that Paul was called to, it was to bear the name before before the Gentiles. And we're going to stop here. We're 5 minutes too. We're going to look at some of these Greeks. So we'll pick it up here next week and begin here. We're in Acts chapter 6, verse 1, about those that had gotten saved before this. Father, now bless the preaching and follow in Christ's name. Amen.